if that's okay, Leslie. So you're a fine reader, and the woman's
Oh,
No,
softness of a woman's
thanks for
voice.
I'd leave it at that,
um,
Steve.
I will
Are
see.
we being sexist
I
so
will.
early
I
in
will.
the session?
I'm saying how eloquent and well you read out of all of us.
I would draw a line under that. It looks like Leslie may be finishing off her breakfast. If that is the case, it might be
No,
better to
I've
have.
pushed it aside. I've pushed
Okay,
it aside
thank you,
now.
Leslie. So you'll read. Is that right? Are you responding to that?
Apparently.
Yeah, there we go. Okay.
Apparently.
I'll pray.
The word of Stephen came through
Okay,
this morning.
Thank
Steve's
you.
praying, Leslie's reading.
Go for it,
Away we
Steve.
go.
Yeah, Heavenly Father, just thank you for my brothers and sisters here. We thank you for a good time. It's going to be a good time. Every day is a good day, and you're good. So we just pray for your goodness to pervade us, the internet, through YouTube, and our families, and all our collective families. We are one family in Jesus. Thank you, Lord. Amen.
Amen. Right. Over to you,
Amen.
Leslie. Go for it. Chapter 13, if you would.
Am I doing the whole thing?
Yes, 18 verses. Be simple.
Okay. So Abraham went up to Egypt, to the Negev, with his wife and everything he had, and Lot went with him. Abraham had become very wealthy in livestock and in silver and gold. From the Negev he went from place to place until he came to Bethel, to the place between Bethel and Ai, where his tent had been earlier, and where he'd first built an altar. There Abraham called on the name of the Lord. Now Lot, who was moving about with Abraham, also had flocks and herds and tents, but the land couldn't support them while they stayed together, for their possessions were so great that they were not able to stay together, and quarrelling arose between Abraham's herdsmen and the herdsmen of Lot. The Canaanites and Perizzites were also living in the land at that time. So Abram said to Lot, "Let's not have any quarrelling between you and me, or between your herdsmen and mine, for we are brothers. Is not the whole land before you? Let's part company. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left." Lot looked up and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan was well watered, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt towards Zoar. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. This is in brackets. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan and set out towards the east. The two men parted company. Abram lived in the land of Canaan, while Lot lived among the cities of the plain and pitched his tent near Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were wicked and were sinning greatly against the Lord. The Lord said to Abram after Lot had parted from him, "Lift up your eyes from where you are and look north and south, east and west, and no compass. All the land that you see I will give you, and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring could be counted. Go, walk through the length and breadth of the land, for I'm giving it to you." So Abram moved his tents and went to live near the great trees of Mamre at Hebron, where he built an altar to the Lord.
Thank you, Leslie. Beautifully read. Steve was right about that. Thank you for that. Now, looking at this, we've left the situation in Egypt. In Egypt, Abraham had lied about his wife, and they'd asked him politely to leave Egypt alive with all his stuff. And so he left with Lot, and a lot of stuff. And you sort of think it's interesting here. Why does he have gold? Why does he have things like that? Actually, if you manage to consolidate your livestock and everything else into gold, if you expanded it by spending it on livestock, you'd have so much livestock, things would exponentially get complicated. So you have to begin selling, and you need to accumulate gold in order to have your wealth. That he's so wealthy, he's having to have gold as part of his wealth. It's like money. It actually is a way of translating something else, that actually if you had possessions like that, it would be too complicated, if you were too wealthy. So there's some of that comes into this, which is interesting. And also his the sign that things get so complicated. So he's got herds that are almost at the limit of how he can control herds. So Lot's guys. So they're bursting at the seams, and they get to this point where they separate. And Abram very kindly gives Lot the choice, and he decides, that looks greener than there, I'll go there. And he chose an area, but an area that was full of strife, as we're going to find out later. And so as we look at all of this, he chooses a greener pastures, heads that way, and so any disagreement is sorted out. And the Lord speaks to Abraham and says, great, I am going to give you this land of Canaan, and actually it's and your descendants will be all over it, so just wander around it, just put your feet all over it. It's yours, for your descendants. And so Abraham does that, and so he explores the land, and finds out how good it is. And actually, I think I've heard that a lot of those lands there, that actually there's a good amount of water under the surface, and actually, you just need to dig down, you'll hit water at various points. So there's actually, it is a place that can sustain life and do that well. And the grass isn't always greener on the other side. Well, we'll find out. I'll open it up. Anyone want to chip in? I see Steve's bright yellow hand, and he's obviously got something hot because he's had to take his sweater off to bring this. Go for it, Steve.
No, yeah, it's thank you. Wonderful stuff, everyone. As it will be. Abraham, I was just listening. It's a joy just to listen to. It's like prophecy, or it's like the Spirit of the Lord is in these words, every word. The story, it's like, Abraham was very wealthy. If we're Carmel, we think, yeah, well, we had loads of stuff, lots of stuff. I mean, all the puns, the old school puns. He was a wealthy guy. Well, I'm just gonna, as you track through it, and then I had the basically what happened. The Lord says, pitch your tent wherever you want, north, south, east, and west. That's the whole earth is yours. It's ours already. There's no need to worry about wealth. The whole well, I've got to pay my bills. Yeah, me too. But you need to know who our dad is. He said, you're my kids. The whole earth is yours. Go subdue it. That's what he said. Going back, not many chapters, subdue it. So the only other thing, before I get off my soapbox, notice where he says, it's nice what he said to it. It's his cousin, isn't it? Or his brother-in-law or something.
Nephew.
Nephew, thank you. He said, there's too many of us here. Yeah, we shouldn't be arguing about, because, and not only that, it's you and your family, me and mine, we're increasing. We've also got the heathen here. All the Canaanites, X, Y, and Z, they're all here. He said, notice where he pitched his tent. Bethel, which is the house of God. And then notice when Lot pitched his tent, or where he went. He went towards, Leslie read it, towards Sodom, which is Sodom and Gomorrah. It's literal, and also all an analogy. So we are in the middle, like with Abraham. We're of his seed. We're between. Our dad lives in Bethel. He owns it all, and we're between the people that in Sodom and Gomorrah. It's like anybody wants to come over. Yeah, you can't bring all that stuff they're doing there. Come over, live in my dad's house, and we're all going there. And notice, to the right is Sodom, the east, and to the left or upwards. I mean, every direction is the law, but it's really, if you want it linear. Yeah, that's enough of me and my gushing. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Leslie?
Yes, as Steve was talking, I was just reminded that Abraham does the right thing, really, doesn't he? He offers the choice to Lot. He offers the choice to the other person. He doesn't take for himself. He doesn't work out, oh, this bit's better, I'll have that. Lot can have the lesser bit. And in the New Testament, it says to prefer the brethren, to put others first. And yes, Lot ends up choosing this area with baddie men in there, and ends up in, as we see later on, not to spoil the story, he ends up later on in a horrible situation. And actually his life does kind of go head on down, kind of following that choice. And so I think, that's maybe a lesson for us to allow God to choose for us and to give others the room to make a choice rather than grabbing for ourselves. And then often that will lead to the best thing for us in our situation. That's all I have to say at the moment.
And where there's strife, it's very very gracious of Abraham to just say, I'll give you first choice. Obviously we need to go our separate ways here. You have first choice. Where would you like to go? That giving and that graciousness often undoes strife. Where people come with their case all ready to make their case, and you just whatever you like. It is a very disarming way to handle it, a very wise way of handling it. Thanks, Leslie.
And actually, he's just done a very silly thing with his wife, hasn't he, with Pharaoh. He's now showing us good behaviour. Just in one sentence, you choose. He's showing a good leadership, actually, isn't he? It's a leadership quality. So he's not laying a law down and being bossy and commanding. He's leaving it to another to make that choice.
Yeah. And also bearing in mind, Lot's not a young chap probably at this point. He's not like a 16-year-old or anything like that. They've travelled a long way together. They were on the way there together with Abraham's father before God spoke to Abraham about leave your father's place and move. So actually there's something going on. There's a length of time. So it's not like saying, oh, some young whippersnapper, he won't survive well, we'll give him. No, he's actually got something about him, Lot. So actually he should be able to survive, but Abraham gives him the best choice. And there's also links with the Garden of Eden as well. In the well watered is the phrase. David, and then Steve.
You're muted. You're muted.
Okay.
Thank you.
I've been waiting for that for years. Right, thanks, Leslie. Go on, David.
I'm just amazed at Abraham's faith in God's promise. I mean, he said, get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house, to a land I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse them who curses you. And in you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. So God's given him a promise. and no matter what happens, I think he doesn't sort of obey completely. He's brought Lot with him. He also goes off down to Egypt, but he's coming back now, and I just get this sense that Abraham's getting closer to God, and when he gets to this point where there's friction between Lot's Lot and Abraham's Lot, Abraham has a much stronger association with God now, and he says, "Okay, well, whatever God puts in, sorts this out. I'll do it His way." So he says to Lot, "You choose." Not, of course, Lot goes down into the Jordan Valley, which is lush and has lots of water and what have you. But at the end of the day, he not wanting to spoil things, but he loses his flocks, his family, and everything as a result of going down there. And one wonders if Abraham had been obedient to God right at the very beginning and didn't take Lot with him, Lot might have prospered much better being left behind rather than actually the route that's actually he's gone through. Although Abraham thought it would be good and it was the right thing to do would be to actually take Lot with him, it's not what God's instruction was. And it just struck me that sometimes God gives us instructions that we actually think, well, I don't think that's the right way, so I'll just adjust it slightly. And it's always God's way is always the best way, and you learn that through the school of hard knocks, really, rather than the Bible school. So it just struck me there that here we've got Abraham with Lot, but Lot, they part eventually, and as you say, he's much older now. So I don't know what the circumstances. It's just something that I think that if Abraham had been true to the letter of what God had told him in the first place, and God had said to Abraham, it's not just a whim of Abraham's will I think God's saying this to me. It's actually in inverted commas that God spoke these words to him, and he perhaps should have, for Lot's purpose, he should have let Lot stay behind. But that's just I think that what I'm trying to say is that God's way is always the best way, even though it might not seem to us to be so at that particular time. And to be obedient to what God's actually saying to you is important.
Yeah, and I think there's listening very carefully to God and having the confidence to follow Him is very, very key. I think again, like I think I said on another day, in some ways the extended family element is interesting in how things work. So even though whereas we're in a Western setting and we have nuclear families that are fairly small and we don't think extended family very much, in other cultures extended family is very common. And so whether Lot should have gone with Abraham or not, I'm still got the jury out on that one. But with the setting of Lot and him separating from Abraham, what becomes clear if you're going down the extended family route is that the promises of God are not for Lot, but are for Abraham.
Yeah.
And actually what becomes clear is God saying the promise is actually, Abraham with his whole family, probably he includes Lot in his family at that point. When it comes to this point of separation, God speaks again the promises to Abraham, but this time it's very clear that the promises are going Abraham's way, not Lot's. And actually, so whichever route we go down, the extended family route, or whether Lot should never have gone with Abraham, we both end up in the same place at this point because it's quite clear that God's blessing is on Abraham. Yeah.
And the separation has a spiritual aspect to it as well as a physical aspect to it, and it's interesting. I just find we come to the same conclusion. God's way is always the best.
and this is a wonderful thing. We can come from different directions and arrive at the same point, and that's the beauty of doing these together. rather than just doing them. Yeah, it's great. Over to you, Steve.
Yeah, yeah, I finally got it. What you were saying, David, and really, this is the same since Adam and Eve. This is the same question for all of us. If Adam had said, "No, we're not going to eat that fruit," where would we be? Honestly, the earth would have been filled. It would have been paradise before you know it. But the thing is, actually, we're no better than Adam. We're all the same. We think, "Oh, I'll speed it along." No, I want to know like God, you know. And that's well, Adam's done it. Sorry, Abraham's done it. Oh, you know, well, I don't know where we are, but he's like, "Oh, I need a child." I don't. Spoiler alert, and you know, we all know. Yeah. Sorry, because I just wrote some. Just going back over my notes. See that Bethel is means the house of God. AI, or actually, if you look in the Hebrew, probably got an H or silent H in front of it. It means heap of ruins. It's ruination. If you want, you know, what's the phrase? Rack and ruin goes to Sodom and Gomorrah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a place of death, and it eternally. I mean, you see it all the way through. That represents eternal death upon death. Yeah, death, the second death. I think the Bible says at least 4 times about the second death in Revelation. Mm-hmm. So we're in the middle. We're in the place of, you know, the well-known valley of indecision. What do you decide? You decide to go west towards the house of God, or upwards, north, or whichever direction. It is every direction. Or are you going to see Lot went east? Where did he pitch his tent? Near Sodom, which and be careful where you pitch your tent. Yeah, not near Sodom, not near Gomorrah. These are lessons, you know. Yeah. Anywhere, but near there.
Yeah.
You know.
So I think just taking your point there, Steve, of where we pitch our tents and taking ground. In this, we've got to point out Abraham and Lot have been through this territory before, on their way to Egypt, so they've got an idea of the territory, but also they may not know that Sodom's bad at this point. They may not know those things. All these things come clear later on, and I think the difference between Abraham and Lot is when Abraham goes into a place that's not so good, he transforms the place. When Lot goes there, he picks up what's in the place. And I think this is an interesting difference. And so I'm going to encourage us on from here into chapter 14, which I'm very happy to read. And so we'll move on with the story. But just before we go any further, Hebron, which I need to bring up, is where Abraham relocates to. And what it's saying about Hebron for its day in the Bronze Age, 2000 to 1500 BC, when Abraham was around, they reckon, Hebron was a major settlement on the Judean hills. It covered between 6 and 7 acres, was heavily fortified, and contained large public buildings. A cruciform tablet was discovered there from the time period, indicates that Hebron was the capital city of the Canaanite kingdom. Okay, so just So
I did have on my notes to say something about Hebron.
Okay.
Mamre means strength, fatness. Yeah. Now we are modern people.
Yeah.
We think fat is a bad thing. No. Back then it was like people were famished. It's like people are starving. I mean, they are now in some sense, but not like we need to now. And that needs to be noted, that where the oaks are settled, there's richness. Yeah. There's strength there, and weakness is near Sodom.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll put my hand down.
So just to move a little bit further on, At the capital city of the Canaanite kingdom, Abraham puts an altar. And what's really interesting is that's later with Joshua about to take, right, the first 5 books, the Pentateuch of the Old Testament, are written before Joshua. They're written by Moses. So actually, if that's the case, these things are written before they go into the Promised Land to say, listen, when you get to Hebron, just remember, Abraham put an altar there. There's a heritage of God ahead of you before you even go into the land. It's powerful stuff, but we won't get sidetracked onto that. That's in a whole rabbit warren of its own. Let's move on to the passage, and I'll take us through. So, in the days of Raphael, the king of Shinar, of Arioch, the king of Elasar, and
You volunteered for
I
this.
did Chedorium, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goim. These kings made war with Bera, the king of Sodom, and Bersha, king of Gomorrah, and Shinab, king of Adamah, Shemebar, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zor, and these joined forces at the valley of Siddim, which is the Salt Sea. 12 years they served Chedorlaomer, but in the 13th year they rebelled. In the 14th year, Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him came and defeated Rephaim at Ashtaroth Karnam, and Zusum in Ham, Eman in Shaveh, and Kiriathaim, and the Horites of the hill country of Seir as far as El Param on the border of the wilderness. And they turned back to El Mishpat, which is Kedesh, and defeated all the country of the Amalekites and the Amorites who were dwelling in Hazazon Tamar, and the king of Sodom, and the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Adamah, and the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zor, went out and joined in battle at the valley of Siddim. When Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam, Tidal, king of Gorim, and Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arish, king of Elasar, 4 kings against 5. Now the valley of Shittim was full. Shittim was full of bitumen pits, and the king of Sodom and Gomorrah fell, and some fell, and the rest fled into the hill country. So the enemy took possession of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their provisions, and went on their way. They also took Lot, the son of Abram's brother, who was dwelling in Sodom, with his possessions, and went on their way. Then one who had escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew, who was living by the oaks of Mamre, and Amorite, the Amorite, brothers of Eshcol and Aner. These were allies of Abram. When Abram heard his kinsman had been taken captive, he led forth his trained men, born in his house, 318 of them, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. And he divided his forces against them by night, and he and his servants, and defeated them and pursued them to Horba, north of Damascus. When he brought back all the possessions, and brought back his kinsman Lot with all his possessions, and the women, and the people. After his return from the defeat of Chedorlaomer, the kings who were with him, the king of Sodom, went out to meet him in the valley of Shaveh, which is the king's valley, and Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was a priest of God Most High. He blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram by God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. And Abram gave him 1/10 of everything. And the king of Sodom said to Abram, Give me the persons, but take the goods yourself. But Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted my hand to the Lord God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, that I would not take a thread or a sandal strap or anything that is yours, lest you say, I've made Abram rich. I will take nothing but what the men have eaten, and the share of the men who went with me. Let Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre have their share. So it's an incredible story. A lot of difficult words there. Thank you for being so polite and helping me through there with your laughter, which I was stifling mine as well. But as it was, my laughter was at my pronunciation and nothing else. But actually, looking at this, Abram now goes to rescue Lot, and there's some interesting facts. Abram had a whole trained force of armed men trained for battle. He was ready to defend his stuff. He was ready for that. He was a force to be reckoned with. And here you just see the military might come through, and strategy and all of that. You think this guy's a farmer, he's a rich guy, he's also got a whole load of know-how militarily as well, and he delivers on that. And we also find Melchizedek, who's going to feature later significantly, and he blesses Abram, but Abram has nothing to do with the king of Sodom and doesn't want anything to do with that. And that may be partly to do with his separation with Lot, that's Lot's Lot, or it could be something deeper than that. But I'll throw it open, and over to you, Steve. I see your hand up first.
Thank you. Yeah, we've got 24 verses and 20 minutes, so I'll be quick. It's like I was listening to Abraham, and basically he said, no, I don't want any man to say I made you rich. He's rich already. Mm-hmm. Really. Yeah, in every sense. I thought he's really like David. That's back to front. David is of the line of Abraham and Abraham, So David was taking what he learned from the Pentateuch. No man makes anyone rich. It's not. No, you can't. It's heathen to say I'm a self-made man. The Lord just chooses. He will make one rich. He's sovereign. I make one poor. I make one X. I make one Y. It's the Lord's choice. Now you got. Okay, I've been given this. What am I going to do with it? Thanks, Lord. I got food here. Thanks, Lord. I got $1 million. Whatever you've got. Honor the Lord with it. 10%. I mean that's if you look at it, it goes all the way through the Old Testament. And Sodom and Gomorrah. I make sure it doesn't get too adult. I mean, I noticed you fell into a cesspool and use a four-letter expletive, or beginning with the S. That is a cesspool. Sodom and Gomorrah. Do not fall in that. And he said, I'm not going to fall in there. Abraham is even before he's called Abraham, he's a righteous man. He makes mistakes, as we all do. So yeah. Last thing. Notice the number 13. I'm being a good. What am I? Anyway. The number 13. 13 years rebellion. It's linked to 13. Say unlucky for some. Yeah, it's unlucky for the rebellious. Yeah, for eternity. Mm-hmm. That'll do me. So I'll put another note. But anyway, there's many verses. There's 18 minutes left. 2 minutes gone to me. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Leslie?
Well, I was just trying to get a handle on what's actually going on here because there were so many difficult names.
So
And
badly pronounced. Yeah.
my advice, if anybody wanted it, is to just pronounce the names as you think they're pronounced and just do it and let everybody else worry about it. That's my route through, but then I didn't have to do it. The kings are all squabbling, they're all fighting. Seems to be a whole pile of them in the valley of Siddim, which is the Salt Sea. For 12 years, they'd been subject to Kedorlaomer. That's a good, difficult one. But in the 13th year, they rebelled. 14th year, the kings went out with him. So there's an awful lot of just fighting, and that must be quite near to where Lot is, which is why he ends up being picked up and carried off with all his possessions. And so that's really what I was trying to do to unravel this whole section. But then there's this wonderful person in verse 13 who escapes from being carried off and reports to Abraham what's going on. And good old Uncle Abraham hears about it and pulls out his 318, that's very precise, isn't it? Trained men born in his household, and they went in pursuit. Divided his men to attack and routed them, pursuing them north of Damascus, and recovered all the goods and brought back his relative Lot and his possessions and everything. And then there's this wonderful meeting with Melchizedek, which is actually where my spirit rose at that point. It was like a yes moment. And I don't know if this is a kind of finding Jesus within all of this, but that's maybe what I've heard in the past. But it is a very lovely moment where Melchizedek comes and blesses Abraham and reinstates everything that's already been said, and reminds him that it's God who's delivered him, that delivered the enemies into his hand. And then there's this little exchange where Abraham won't take anything. I don't fully understand it, because Abraham gives him 1/10 of everything. And the king of Sodom says, give me the people and keep the goods for yourself. But Abraham says, I've raised my hand to the Lord, God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, and have taken an oath that I will accept nothing belonging to you, not even a thread or thong of a sandal, so that you will never be able to say. So he won't accept anything except what they've eaten. So is he saying that actually what the king of Sodom has taken now belongs to him, and he doesn't want anything back that's actually now belongs to him? I'm not quite sure what this means. Maybe somebody else knows.
The way I see it is basically when you go to war, you capture all the goods, you take a whole load of loot with you. That was part of the reason for the wars, stealing loot from people around them. When Abraham goes, he gets everything back, including all the people, all the goods that were taken. And a lot of that was all the possessions of Sodom, all the possessions of all these different kingdoms that had been taken, he's got. And he's saying, I don't want any of that stuff. And and the guy says, well, just give me the people and you can keep the stuff. And Abraham says, no, because you're going to say you made me great. None of that. And instead, what he does is the guy who blesses him, Melchizedek, says, blessed be Abraham of the God Most High. To the person who blesses him, Abraham gives 1/10. And so not a tenth of what was taken, but a tenth of his own possessions he's giving to this guy. And he's saying, I won't have any of the possessions for the battle, because it's his right, because he's won the battle, to have everything. But he says, oh, no, you take what's yours and you go. And just remember, give to the people who fought with me. They can have their share of your lot, but I'm not going to have any of it. And actually, the guy who's blessed me, I'm going to give him a tenth of everything I own. It's almost the opposite spirit to this possessiveness, to all the things there. Abraham is generous, but in doing all of this, which we'll get into, I'm sure, he sets a model in place of tithes and offerings. In doing this, he shows something of Melchizedek is a type of Jesus, and we've looked at that when we looked at Hebrews. That's all coming up. And there's almost like Abraham wandering around the promised land. One day my ancestors will own this land. One day this will, well, they won't own it, they'll borrow it from God. But actually that's going to happen. Actually, the trails he's doing, the things he's doing are all of significance later. He's setting a narrative. He's setting a thing in place that will later be the narrative. And this is happening with Melchizedek, this decision not to take any of the goods, the decision not to have anything to do with that. There's something of holiness, there's something of being set apart, there's a whole load of things going on here. And later on, offerings to the Lord were called korban, right? Which means it couldn't be touched because it was an offering to the Lord. And in a way, Abraham recognizes something about Melchizedek, that God's on him, and gives an offering to the Lord, to Melchizedek, in place of God, and that, so there's something very powerful being modelled here. But I don't want to say too much. I'll go to David and then Steve.
Yeah, it's interesting this, and I haven't quite got my thoughts around it at the moment. But in the first verse of chapter 14, it says, "And it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar," and I thought I've heard Shinar somewhere before. And if you go to chapter 10:10, and the beginning of his kingdom was was Babel, and it's where the Tower of Babel was built and destroyed. And everybody, I mean, when I start reading this, there's chaos with everybody fighting everybody else. There's no unity here at all. And God has actually caused chaos because they've all got different languages now. And it's like God's caused chaos, and then he brings it all back into alignment with Abraham, or Abram as he's called at the moment. And Melchizedek comes in, the kind of Christ, and sort of seals it all together again in God's direction, not in man's direction. That's all that I'm seeing at the moment. There is something in there that gives a picture of the chaos that God brought into Babel, because they could achieve anything in their own strength, and he brings it into chaos, and they're all fighting, and then Abraham comes back and sort of brings it all together, and Melchizedek then comes in, and he pronounces a blessing on Abraham, and also starts this the tithing idea. I love the way that in the scriptures, God is giving a completeness. He's not giving a series of unrelated stories. It's all got this picture of Christ in the future coming through. And, when we try and build things in our own strength, it doesn't actually work. It falls apart because it's not complete. It's only when God's in there that the building is complete and solid. And it's there we go. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be a sermon in there somewhere.
Oh yeah, several. but what's also interesting, what you're saying about the chaos there, and my mind went a couple of different ways. One was the Man from U.N.C.L.E., and the enemies were always chaos, weren't they, on the program? But actually,
you're showing your age now.
I am. But chaos, actually, the chaos around Babel is continuing in this
Yeah.
warfare. There's these fights all over this valley. It looks lovely. Looks like the Garden of Eden, a well-watered garden. Actually, into that setting is strife. It looks
Yeah.
so good, but actually from a distance, but actually near up, it's just full of strife.
It's only about 200 years since Babel,
Mm.
Tower of Babel.
Wow.
So it must be still in their psyche, what that meant to them.
Yeah. It's very, very interesting. And this is the beauty of the Bible. It's got layers upon layers upon layers, and it all makes sense the whole way through. It all ties together so beautifully.
Yeah, I'd never seen that tie up before.
Yeah.
It's yeah. Good.
Wonderful. Thanks, David. Steve?
Lovely. A 7-minute warning to we close down. I'm loving everything I'm hearing. It's like I'll just sum up. Not this is my job to do, but I was loving what David was saying there. I've heard this is great stuff, because there's so many names in here, and all these names are so significant. There's nothing in the Bible. We've been talking about this for eternity. Did you know that? Oh, it's amazing. God causes chaos, and I'm just gonna. I'm quoting from David here. I'm just gonna add on to a bit, because God causes chaos in man's exclusive plans. What am I talking about? Yeah, we exclude God. We don't. They had it at Babel. We don't need God. This is all. Gnosis too. I mean, I'm going to be going back through this chapter. There's so much rich stuff. Valley of Siddim. So, say that carefully. That word. The Salt Sea. This is the Dead Sea.
Mm-hmm.
Be careful where you go in there. Nothing can grow in there. You can float. Oh, look at me, I'm floating, I'm weightless. No, you're in the Dead Sea. That's a place where the dead go. Nothing can grow. It's so salty. You just float. Sit, read my paper, read my scroll. I like to go floating in there. That's it. Really. Yeah. I mean, so there's so much. One other thing. This is so rich. Who was living? Notice 13. The one who had escaped came and told Abraham, the Hebrew, who was living by the oaks. I mean, we know the same place. Mamre, the Amorite.
Yeah. Mamre
is the place that is fat. That's a good fatness, richness, strength. Mm-hmm. It's not people. That's what the enemy did. They wanted to. That's what they wanted to do to the whole of the Jewish nation, as we know, was emancipate them. Yeah, just feed them to keep them alive.
Emaciate.
That's thank you. But and that is the enemy's plan. He's laughing. Oh, look what I did to God's people.
Mm-hmm.
And that was through Hitler. It was a disgusting thing.
Yeah.
As just to treat people like that. Let alone rats and mice and anything. It's like, well, everyone's got to live. So just finish this thing of 13. He lived by the oaks. That is us. We are oaks of righteousness. We live in the land of fatness, strength, richness. Don't be, just be happy where you're living. North, south, east, and west. The Lord has called you and appointed you to be strong and rich. Thank you. Yep. 56, 4-minute warning.
Don't worry.
About a thing. But every little thing. Anyway, we've always been tuneful on this, but you're far more tuneful than me, Leslie. Right, looking at this, there's a couple of things. God brings order out of chaos. What we're finding out about this land that Abraham and Lot are in is it's full of strife. It's full of difficulties. It's full of mess. And where God's people goes, it brings order and brings a turning around of power base. It brings something of that. This is not the same because the influence of Abraham and the anointing that's on him is bringing change. He's making allies with really good people. Lot makes allies with really rubbish people. Actually, there's a sense here where there's in one of the prophecies in Isaiah, it says, about people walking in the wilderness. Wherever the pilgrims put their feet, the wilderness comes alive. It's full of flowers. It's in the middle of the desert. The whole thing's full of water. The whole thing opens up. And there's a picture of that in Isaiah, which is written many, many years after this. But almost I get the sense that wherever Abraham's feet are going, there's some good stuff coming out of chaos. And actually there's something of that God leading him, and his leadership under God is bringing life everywhere. And when we follow God's leading in our lives, we should bring life wherever we go. And we can go into the messiest of situations, we will bring life. We can go into the biggest turmoil and strife that seems to have run for hundreds of years, like we were saying about the Tower of Babel and this time scale. There's still this strife in the land after that. Actually, there's something of Abraham brings something to the show. We need to look, what is God asking us to bring into situations of strife and chaos? And also, that responsiveness in the heart of Abraham towards Melchizedek is an interesting one. He's able to be a warrior in one setting, but he's also able to be this incredibly soft guy towards God with the next blink, and it's deep inside him, and it's wonderful to see, and something to be marveled at and respected. Sorry, I saw your hand there, David. Go for it.
No, I didn't want to interject. It's just that when you were saying that wherever we go with in God's blessing, we will bring peace and we will bring order in there. And I think underlying that, it's not doing it because we think we should be doing it. It's actually, and I'm just looking at verse 6 in the next chapter, which I know we shouldn't do, but it says, "And he believed in the Lord, and he counted it to him for righteousness." And I think the key is that we believe what God actually speaks to us. We believe in Jesus and what he means.
Yeah.
And we have that written in our hearts, so it flows out in rivers of living water.
Brilliant. And go on, Leslie.
But actually, New Testament wise, we can bring the dividing sword, because we're bringing something that people don't want to hear and find difficult. So it's both and, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whatever's happening kingdom wise.
It's the peace after the sword, which is what's happened here with Abraham.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not all slice and dice. There's aftercare as well. But thank you all. It's been a wonderful discussion today. We're just about to go into some really exciting chapters. There's the chapter of the covenant of Abraham, and then following that, we've also got Abraham's descendants, and we get this whole discussion on Hagar and Sarai and all of that. So we're about to go through some really exciting territory. We'll leave it there for today here, and I'll transition us offline, but thank you for joining us.